Hi, I'm Amanda McKay. I'm a professional artist and I'm making these videos of creativity tips to help people enhance their creativity. Regardless of their level of expertise, these tips are meant to be useful for any level, whether you're a professional or just starting out in your creative hobby. So for this tip, I want to talk about something that affects almost everybody, unless you happen to be maybe wealthy enough to pay somebody else to do this for you, or you have a very simple life with not a lot of responsibilities to worry about. But that's dealing with these kind of repetitive, mindless tasks, these mundane tasks that it seems like a lot of our time is taken up with, and a lot of our so-called free time for sure. And I want to address this because this is something that can definitely interfere with your creativity, whether by just taking time away from your creative practice or from just having you so exhausted from just the pointlessness of it all and just the energy required to do all of these mundane tasks, that you wind up without any energy left over for creativity. So yes, if you happen to have a lot of money, you can probably pay somebody to do your laundry, clean your house, do your shopping for you. If you're, or maybe you have a very pared down and simple life where you don't have a lot of responsibilities and you don't have you have fewer of these tasks, because maybe you just live by yourself and you don't have kids and you don't have pets, that sort of thing. But most of us have to deal with this a lot, and it really, to me, it often feels like a waste of life, and definitely not what I thought my adult life would be like when I was a little kid and dreaming about the future. So you probably had had a lot of disillusionment yourself after you grew up, I'm guessing, because I think most of us don't really equate this with what adulthood, how much of it is going to be taken up by these kind of tasks. But yes, they can definitely wear you out and make it where you just don't have time. So if you happen to be not living such a simple life, or not wealthy enough to just pay somebody to do all these things for you, then what can you do? Well, the first thing would be, of course, to ask yourself if you can carve out just a certain chunk of time, like maybe from one day, maybe part of a Saturday or something, where you just give yourself a break from these tasks, you let them pile up, and you just focus on your creative hobby, or coming up with ideas to be, with your creative ideas that you might be able to execute in the future. Are you able to do this? Can you just give yourself a short break from these kind of mundane, mindless tasks? If you're not able to do that, then is there something that you can possibly work on in the middle of the task? An example would be if you have to go to a laundromat. I know a lot of people would take a book or scroll on their phones if they're having to just sit around in a laundromat waiting. But is it possible that you could actually work on your creative practice? Or, maybe you can't do that. I'm an oil painter, so I certainly wouldn't be able to sit in a laundromat trying to paint. But could I have my ideas notebook with me and be trying to come up with ideas for my next painting? A few months ago, I had to replace, in my car, the stupid visor that has a mirror on it, and it's like the sun visor and the flap, and it can go out to the side also, or block the sun directly in front of you. It got to where it wouldn't move, and it was just kind of dangerously in the way of the windshield, so I had to go to the dealer and replace it, and that was like basically $400. But anyway, I had to sit there at the dealer for, I think, an hour and a half while they worked on that, and they did have a nice little waiting area set up. So I took my laptop with me and different files of things that I was working on, coming up with ideas, and I tried to at least make that productive so that I felt like I wasn't, wasting a big chunk of my life sitting there at the car dealer, and I wasn't just mindlessly scrolling on my phone, but I was actually trying to use the time to work on something creative. And maybe you have, maybe you crochet, for example, and that's something that you could possibly do in public if you're just sitting around waiting, or embroidering or something like that. Again, that's not something that I can tend to do with oil painting, to just do in public, but I did come up with something else that I could work on. Um, you might think whether your budget allows, like if there is some task that you just really, really hate, um, is there something that maybe you could find in your budget to pay somebody else to do? And again, I know that's kind of a long shot, and most of us can barely keep a roof over our heads. So, but maybe there's something where the trade-off might be worth it if maybe it's something that's not that expensive. Now, maybe you can't do any of these. You aren't able to carve out any time and you're just stuck. In that case, the best thing that I can recommend is to try to have a mindset change where at least it's not as mentally exhausting to have to be doing these mindless repetitive tasks. I do have an earlier video that I've made about the beauty of ordinary things and elevating the mundane. And in that case, I was really talking about art, like taking a photograph of something that would be considered ugly and making it look beautiful. But you could apply that same mindset when you're actually working on one of these tasks. If you can find the beauty in what you're doing, maybe it's something meditative, maybe it's something that since the dawn of time people have had to do, like preparing food. If you're not into cooking and baking, that can sometimes just seem like a real chore. But maybe you can, if you just don't like it and you can't get somebody else to do it for you, then maybe you can find a way to either think that, like, okay, you're tapping into what your ancestors have done. Maybe you can find a way to make it feel more creative. But as long as it's not something where you feel like you're just resentful of the time that you're spending on it, I think feeling the resentment is what tends to make us just mentally exhausted, where then we don't feel like we have a lot left over to be creative when we're done with this kind of thing. So that would be the last resort. If you really just can't do anything about this, can't put it aside, just find a way to elevate this mindless task, whatever it is, to where it isn't as draining to you. And that at least will help it where you have a little bit of energy left over to be creative, even though the amount of time taken away was the same. So if you do have any ideas that are better than these about what to do about these tasks, please let me know, because I really do feel like a lot of life is spent on these things that, don't we have, why don't we have robots doing all of this for us in 2026? I don't know. But if you have any suggestions for this, I would love to see them, and I'm sure other people would too. And let me know if you find this tip to be useful in any way. I hope you do. Again, my name is Manda McKay, and thank you so much for watching.